I bought 33 pounds of brisket for the Sunday family barbecue. That's 33 pounds that cost me $250 out of my own pocket. I never could have imagined that my daughter-in-law, Rachel, and her mother, Stella, would show up completely empty-handed but loaded with plastic containers as if they were going to a free buffet. And when I saw my own son, Julian, packing up the grilled meat for them to take home, I said 3 words that ended the party forever. But let me tell you from the beginning, because this story has more layers than an onion, and each one stings more than the last. It was a Saturday morning when I decided to host this barbecue. Our house has always been the family's gathering place. I'm 65 years old, and my whole life I've made it my mission to keep this family together. My husband, Tom, always says I have a gift for turning any get-together into a memorable celebration. My kitchen is big. Our backyard has enough space for everyone, and my heart has always been open to anyone who needs a warm meal. That morning, I woke up early, as I always do. I made coffee for Tom and me, and while he read the newspaper, I was already planning the menu. I decided on some grilled sausages, provolone cheese, a fresh garden salad, roasted potatoes, and of course, the star of the show, 33 pounds of the best cuts of meat I could find. Prime rib, short ribs, flank steak, and some pork belly for those who prefer something a little lighter. Tom looked at me over his glasses when I told him my plan. "Honey, isn't that a little much? There are only 8 of us," he said with that smile that always puts me at ease. "Oh, Tom, you know I'd rather have too much than too little. Besides, if there are leftovers, everyone can take some home for the week," I replied as I wrote down everything I needed to buy in my notebook. I went to the local market around noon. The butcher, Mr. Davis, has known me for over 20 years. When I told him I needed 33 pounds of meat for a family barbecue, he whistled in admiration. "Mrs. Miller, this is going to be a feast to remember," he said, selecting the best cuts. "Look at this prime rib. It's just beautiful. And these short ribs are at the perfect stage of aging." I paid the $250 without blinking. It was a lot of money, yes, but to me there's no price when it comes to family. I've always believed that a good meal is the best way to show love. Every dollar I spent on that meat was an investment in happy moments, in shared laughter, in the family unity that means so much to me. When I got home with the groceries, Tom helped me organize everything in the fridge. The meat took up most of the space, but seeing it there, waiting to be cooked with love, filled me with satisfaction. "Tomorrow is going to be a perfect day," I told Tom as we put away the last packages. That afternoon, I called everyone to confirm they were coming. First, I called my son, Julian. He's 32 years old. He's a good kid, a hard worker, but since he married Rachel 3 years ago, I feel like something has changed in him. It's not that she's a bad person, but sometimes it seems like he walks on eggshells so he doesn't upset his wife. "Mom, of course we'll be there," he said over the phone. "Rachel is really excited. Oh, and her mom, Stella, is coming too. I hope you don't mind." Mind? Of course not. My house has always had an open-door policy. Stella is a 60-year-old widow who lives alone in a small apartment. I thought it would be nice for her to share the day with us. How naive I was. I also called my nieces Erica and Louisa, who always show up with a homemade dessert or a side dish. They understand that a family gathering is a group effort, that everyone contributes to make everything perfect. Sunday dawned beautifully. The sky was clear without a single cloud, and the air had that refreshing crispness that promises a perfect day for being outdoors. I woke up at 7 in the morning, full of energy and excitement. I started preparing everything early. I set the big patio table with the green tablecloth I inherited from my mother. I took out the good plates, the ones I only use for special occasions. I chopped tomatoes, onions, and bell peppers for the garden salad. The aroma of freshly chopped onion filled the kitchen, mixing with the smell of the coffee I kept warm for when the guests arrived. Tom took charge of the grill. He has always been meticulous with the fire. He says the secret to a good barbecue is patience and properly prepared charcoal. I watched him arrange the logs, preparing the embers with the care that only he possesses. Meanwhile, I prepared the roasted potatoes, washed the lettuce, and got everything ready so that when the family arrived, All we had to do was enjoy ourselves. At 11 in the morning, Erica and Louisa arrived. As always, they didn't come empty-handed. Erica brought an apple pie she had baked early that morning, still warm and with a sweet aroma that reminded me of my childhood. Louisa arrived with a fruit salad and a bottle of red wine she had been saving for a special occasion. "Aunt Betty, it smells incredible in here," Erica said as she kissed me on the cheek. "What can we do to help?" That's the difference. They came asking how they could help, their hands full with gifts for everyone, with that generous attitude that makes a family gathering truly special. I put them to work preparing the provolone and cutting the bread. While Tom started putting the sausages on the grill, everything was going perfectly. The house was filled with laughter. The aroma of the meat was beginning to waft through the backyard, and I felt I was in my element. This is my happiness. Seeing my family together, enjoying themselves, feeling that my home is the place where everyone wants to be. But at 12:30, everything began to change. I heard the doorbell and ran to open the door. It was Julian, my son, with that smile that always melts my heart. But behind him came Rachel and Stella. And that's when I had the first sign of alarm. Rachel was wearing a very elegant red dress, high heels, and was perfectly made up as if she were going to a gala dinner, not a family barbecue in her mother-in-law's backyard. But what caught my attention most was that she was carrying a large cloth bag, and I could see several plastic containers inside, in different sizes. Stella, her mother, was also dressed up in a beige suit and a huge handbag. She also had a bag, and from the sound it made when she walked, it was clear that she also had containers. "Hi, Betty," Rachel said with that sweet voice she always uses when people are around. She gave me a kiss on the cheek, but it was one of those kisses in the air that never really touched my skin. "Your house is so lovely. It smells delicious." Stella greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Betty, it's a pleasure to see you. Thank you for inviting me to your beautiful home." I waited. I waited for them to take something out of those bags, a bottle of wine, a dessert, even a package of cookies from the supermarket. But no. They put their bags in a corner and went directly to the patio as if they were VIP guests at a 5-star restaurant. "Didn't you bring anything?" I asked, trying to keep the smile on my face. "Oh, Betty, we ran late," Rachel said with a nervous giggle. "But you know you always cook so well that anything we would have brought would have been overshadowed by your food." It was an excuse wrapped in flattery, but I'm not foolish. I've lived 65 years, and I know how to recognize when someone is trying to make me believe that their lack of consideration is actually a compliment to me. Julian, my poor son, looked uncomfortable. I know him like the back of my hand, and I could see in his eyes that he also realized something wasn't right, but he didn't say anything. He never says anything when it means contradicting his wife, even if it's about doing the right thing. "Well, don't you worry," I said, "because that's me. I always try to make everyone feel comfortable, even if I'm boiling inside. The important thing is that you're here." We headed to the patio, where Tom already had the grill smoking with the sausages. Erica and Louisa greeted Julian warmly, but I noticed they were more reserved with Rachel and Stella. They had also realized something was off. "How wonderful!" Stella exclaimed when she saw the grill. "So much meat! This looks like a restaurant." "Betty bought 33 pounds, Tom said proudly, not realizing what that information would provoke. I saw Rachel's and Stella's eyes light up. It wasn't admiration for my generosity. It was pure calculation. 33 pounds of meat meant there would be plenty of leftovers, and they already had their containers ready to take as much as possible. 33 pounds, my goodness, Rachel said. No wonder we brought our containers. We knew Betty is always so generous. There was the confession. They hadn't brought the containers by chance. They had come specifically prepared to take food home without contributing a single dime or even a soda, but with enough nerve to show up with containers as if my house were a free-for-all buffet. What came next was even worse. They sat at the table like queens waiting to be served. They didn't even ask if they could help with anything. While Erica and Louisa moved around with me, carrying plates, serving drinks, and setting things up, Rachel and Stella stayed seated, chatting with each other, looking at their phones, and making comments about everything they saw. "Oh, look how nice the garden is," Stella said, pointing at my plants. "Though those flowers look a little wilted, don't they? Maybe they need more water." "More water? My flowers were perfect. I water them with love every day. I take care of them as if they were my children." But she had to find something to criticize, something that would make her feel superior. Rachel wasn't far behind. "This tablecloth is very nice, Betty, but I think it's a bit faded. Are you going to get a new one soon?" My mother's tablecloth, the tablecloth I used at Julian's wedding, at all the important birthdays, at every family celebration, the tablecloth that represents our family's tradition and love, and she was criticizing it as if it were an old rag. Tom, bless his heart, didn't hear those comments because he was focused on the grill, but I heard every single one, every hint, every veiled criticism, every comment designed to make me feel that my home, my food, my effort were not good enough for their standards. When Tom announced that the sausages were ready, Rachel and Stella were the first to get up, not to help serve, but to be first in line. They served themselves huge portions, took the best pieces, and when they sat down to eat, they began with their comments. "The sausage is good," Stella said, "though maybe it needed a little more salt." More salt? Tom has been barbecuing for 30 years. He knows exactly how much salt to put on everything, but she had to find a flaw. Rachel joined the chorus of criticisms disguised as compliments. "The salad is fresh, Betty, although I would have used a little less vinegar, but, well, everyone has their own style." My garden salad, the same recipe I learned from my mother, who learned it from my grandmother, the same salad Julian adored as a child and always asked me to make for him. Now it turns out it had too much vinegar, but what hurt me most was seeing Julian. My own son nodded his head every time his wife or his mother-in-law made a comment, as if he agreed with them, as if everything his mother did with love was suddenly wrong. When it was time to serve the main cuts of meat, things got worse. Tom had done a masterful job. The prime rib was cooked to perfection, juicy on the inside and seared on the outside. The short ribs fell off the bone. The flank steak had that perfect texture that only comes from years of experience, but they found a way to criticize even that. "Oh, it's a shame the prime rib is a little overdone," Rachel said as she served herself the biggest portion on the plate. Overdone? It was perfect. Anyone with even a little knowledge of barbecuing would have realized that Tom had achieved the exact right point. But she needed to criticize something. She needed to establish her culinary superiority. Stella didn't fall behind. "At home, I always put a little lemon on the meat before grilling it. It gives it a special flavor. Maybe next time you could try it." Next time? She was already planning the next time she would come to eat for free and criticize everything. The audacity of this woman had no limits. But what really made my blood boil was what happened next. As they ate, and ate a lot, despite all their criticisms, they started taking photos of the food with their phones. "This is perfect for my Instagram," Rachel said, posing with a piece of meat on her fork. "My friends are going to be so jealous." She took at least 10 different photos, trying angles, adjusting the light, making sure the amount of food on the table was visible. Then she started typing on her phone. "What are you writing?" Julian asked her. "A post about this amazing family barbecue," she replied without looking up from her phone. "I'm going to put, 'Perfect Sunday with the best meat in town. There's nothing like a good home-cooked meal.'" Home-cooked meal. She hadn't lifted a finger. She hadn't contributed a dime, but there she was, creating an image on social media as if she were the hostess, as if she were the one who had organized everything, who had spent her money, who had spent hours preparing every detail. Stella followed her daughter's example. She also started taking photos and typing on her phone. "I'm going to tag all my friends," she said with a malicious smile. "They're going to think I have a very generous family." Generous? Of course we're generous, but there's a difference between generosity and being taken for a fool. Erica and Louisa exchanged looks of disbelief. They had also realized what was happening, but they were too polite to say anything. I also stayed quiet, but inside, I felt like I was swallowing ground glass. When they finished eating, after having second helpings, they started commenting on how full they were and how impossible it would be to finish all that meat. "There's too much food," Rachel exclaimed, putting a hand to her stomach. "There's no way we can finish all of this." "It would be a shame to waste so much good meat," Stella added with a feigned expression of concern. That's when they revealed their true intentions. As if by magic, their bags with the plastic containers appeared. Containers of all sizes, big ones for the meat, medium ones for the salads, small ones for the sauces. "We don't want anything to go to waste," Rachel said as she started taking out the containers. "We can take a little home for the week." A little? They had brought enough containers to take home half of the food. And the worst part of it all was that Julian, my own son, got up and started helping them without asking if it was okay, without considering that maybe I wanted to save some of the meat that had cost $250 of my money. "Mom always cooks too much," he said to his wife and mother-in-law with a smile. "It's better that you take it before it goes bad." That's when something inside me broke. Seeing my son packing up the meat I had bought, prepared with love, for 2 women to take home, 2 women who had arrived empty-handed but with containers at the ready, after criticizing every single thing we had done. I watched them pack the best cuts, the leftover prime rib, the most tender short ribs, even the provolone that Erica had so lovingly prepared. They filled container after container as if they were in a supermarket shopping with my money. Tom looked at me from the grill with eyes full of indignation, but he didn't know how to react either. Erica and Louisa were petrified, watching these 2 women take more food than we had brought combined for a family. When Julian closed the last container and handed it to Rachel with a smile, something exploded inside me. 65 years of putting up with things, of being the understanding woman, the tolerant mother-in-law, the mother who always forgives everything. But that day, seeing my own son packing up my generosity for them to take away as if it were an entitlement, I couldn't take it anymore. I got up from my chair, all eyes turned to me. The backyard fell completely silent. I stood up from my chair with a calmness I didn't even know I possessed. Every gaze was fixed on me. The yard, which moments before was full of chatter and laughter, now felt like a cemetery. Even the birds stopped singing. I walked slowly to where Julian was, with the last container in his hands, ready to give it to Rachel. My steps sounded loud against the patio tiles. I could feel my heart pounding in my temples, as if it were about to burst. When I got to him, I looked him straight in the eyes, those eyes I had known since the day he was born, that I had seen cry when he was a baby, that had shone with joy at his graduation, that were filled with love on his wedding day. Now they looked at me with confusion, not understanding why his mother was standing there like a statue without saying a word. I slowly took the container from his hands, without being rough, but with a firmness that made everyone hold their breath. "Get the hell out," I said, loud and clear. 3 words, just 3 words, but they were enough to make the world stop completely. The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved, no one breathed. It was as if I had just dropped a bomb in the middle of the family table. Rachel was the first to react. Her mouth opened like a fish out of water, and her eyes instantly filled with crocodile tears. "Betty, how could you say something like that?" she yelled, putting a hand to her chest as if she had just been stabbed. "We only wanted to take a little food. I didn't think it would bother you so much." What? She didn't think it would bother me? Of course she didn't think. She didn't think when she came empty-handed. She didn't think when she brought containers to take my food. She didn't think when she criticized every single thing we had lovingly prepared. She didn't think about anything but taking advantage. Stella jumped up from her chair like a spring, her face red with indignation. "This is unacceptable. I have never been spoken to like this. I am an older woman. I deserve respect." Respect. Where was the respect when she came to my house without bringing anything? Where was the respect when she criticized my flowers, my tablecloth? Where was the respect when she took photos of my food to show off on social media as if it were hers? Respect is earned, I told her, looking at her intently, and you two came here as if my house were a free restaurant. Julian was pale as a sheet. He looked from me to his wife, from his wife to his mother-in-law, like a lost child who doesn't know whose side to take. "Mom, please," he begged me in a trembling voice. "It was just a misunderstanding. Rachel didn't mean to offend you." A misunderstanding? Calling a premeditated plan to show up with containers to take food for free a misunderstanding? Calling the constant criticisms, the derogatory comments, the total lack of consideration a misunderstanding? "Julian," I said with a voice I didn't even recognize, "I spent $250 of my savings on this meat. I spent 2 days preparing everything so that you could come and enjoy it as a family. And all I received were criticisms and the nerve to watch you pack up my food for them to take home." Rachel started to cry harder, but they were tears of rage, not sadness. "I didn't know I had to bring something. I thought it was a normal invitation." "A normal invitation?" I exploded. "Is it normal to show up to a party with empty containers? Is it normal to criticize everything you're served? Is it normal to take photos of someone else's food to show off online?" Tom came over and put a hand on my shoulder. I could feel that he was also furious, but he was trying to stay calm out of respect for the family. "Betty is right," he said with that deep voice he only uses when he's truly upset. "This is not okay." Erica and Louisa nodded in silence. They had seen everything. They had been witnesses to every comment, every disrespect, every abuse of trust. But Julian, my poor son, was completely lost. Instead of defending his mother, instead of acknowledging that his wife and mother-in-law had behaved poorly, he took their side. "Mom, you're exaggerating," he said in a voice that broke my heart. "Rachel is my wife. Stella is practically my mother-in-law. They're family." Family. That was family to him. People who come to take advantage, who criticize everything, who respect nothing. "Family respects," I replied with tears in my eyes. "Family contributes. Family appreciates. This isn't family, Julian. This is abuse." Rachel stopped crying for a moment and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was pure hatred. "You're a bitter old woman," she spat at me. "You can't stand that your son has his own family. You're jealous because you're no longer the most important person in his life." Those words hit me like a hammer to the chest. Old, bitter, jealous, as if loving my son and wanting respect in my own home were a bad thing. Stella joined the attack. "It's true. Since we arrived, you've only had a sour face. It's clear you don't like your daughter-in-law. You're one of those toxic mothers-in-law who can't let go of their sons." Toxic mother-in-law. Me, the one who had opened my house, who had spent my savings, who had cooked with love, who had tried to make these two women who arrived with empty hands and mouths full of criticism feel comfortable. Julian didn't say a word to defend me. He just stood there, watching as his wife and mother-in-law insulted me in my own home, in my own backyard, after they had eaten my food and were ready to take half of the leftovers. That's what hurt me the most, not the words of two women who clearly had no manners or respect. What destroyed me was my son's silence, seeing how he chose the easy path, how he preferred that his mother endure insults rather than stand up for what was right. "Get out," I told them with a calmness that surprised even me. "Get out of my house right now." "With pleasure," Rachel yelled as she picked up her handbag. "We are never setting foot in this house again." "And we don't expect you to come to ours," Stella added as she put her phone in that huge bag. They headed towards the exit like two offended queens, with their heads held high and the fake dignity of someone who believes they are the victim of an injustice. But before she left, Rachel turned around and delivered one last stab. "Julian, I hope you know who your mother really is. Today you've seen her true face." My son looked at me with eyes full of confusion and pain. For a moment, I thought he was going to stay, that he was going to realize I was right, that he was going to apologize for everything that had happened, but he followed his wife. I watched them walk away down the hallway. I heard the front door close, the car engine start, and then it was all gone in the distance. And I was left standing there in my backyard, surrounded by the deepest silence I had ever felt in my life. The silence that followed their departure was devastating. I stood in the middle of the patio, looking at the table full of dirty dishes, the remains of the food I had prepared with so much love, the empty containers they had abandoned in their dramatic escape. It was as if a hurricane had passed through my house and destroyed everything in its path. Tom was the first to move. He came over and hugged me without saying a word. I could feel him trembling with the rage he had been holding in all afternoon. My husband is a peaceful man who always tries to avoid conflict, but that day he had seen his wife humiliated in her own home. "You did the right thing," he whispered in my ear. It was about time someone told them the truth. Erica and Louisa also approached. I could see a mix of admiration and concern in their eyes. Admiration because I had had the courage to defend my dignity, and concern because they knew this wouldn't be the end of it. "Aunt Betty," Erica said, taking my hand, "we saw everything. They behaved horribly towards you. You didn't have to put up with that." "It's true," Louisa added. "They came here as if you were their personal servant, bringing nothing, criticizing everything, and on top of that, wanting to take half the food. What nerve!" Their words comforted me a little, but they couldn't erase the pain I felt in my chest. My own son had abandoned me. He had chosen to defend two women who were clearly manipulating him, who had made him an accomplice to this humiliation. We stayed there for a while, hugging, trying to process what had happened. Then we began to clear the table in silence. Each plate I picked up reminded me of a moment from the afternoon. Here, Rachel had sat, criticizing my salad. Over there, Stella had been complaining about my flowers. In that spot, I had seen Julian packing up the meat as if it were a free delivery service. There was a lot of food left over. Ironically, after all the drama over the containers, there was enough meat for several days. Tom started putting it in the fridge while I washed the dishes, trying to keep my hands busy so I wouldn't think too much, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. How had we gotten to this point? When had my son stopped being the man I raised, the one who knew how to distinguish right from wrong? When had he allowed his wife to turn him into someone who could watch his mother be humiliated without defending her? Erica and Louisa stayed late, helping me clean up and keeping me company in my grief. When they left, the house was submerged in a silence that seemed to scream my loneliness. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, reliving every moment of the afternoon, every word that had been said, every gesture of contempt I had received. But what hurt me most was Julian's betrayal. The days that followed were the most difficult of my life. I hoped my son would call, that he would come to apologize, that he would admit he had made a mistake. But nothing happened. My phone remained completely silent. On the third day, I couldn't take it anymore. I called him myself. "Hello, Mom," he said in a cold voice I had never heard before. "Julian, we need to talk," I said, trying to stay calm. "There's nothing to talk about," he replied with a harshness that broke my heart. "What you said on Sunday was unforgivable. Rachel has been crying all these days. Stella is so upset she had to go to the doctor for her high blood pressure." Rachel crying, Stella at the doctor. Please, the same women who had come to my house like emotional vampires were now playing the victims. "Julian, they showed up with containers at the ready," I explained. "They brought nothing, they criticized everything, and they wanted to take half the food I paid for." "That doesn't justify what you said to them," he interrupted. "They are older women. They deserve respect." Respect? Where was the respect for his mother? Where was the respect for the woman who had raised him, educated him, and loved him unconditionally for 32 years? "And what about me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Am I not an older woman who deserves respect? Am I not your mother?" "You are my mother. he said in a tone that sounded like an unpleasant obligation. But Rachel is my wife, and I will always defend my wife. There was the truth. That was his priority. Not justice, not what was right, but keeping a woman who had clearly manipulated him happy. Fine, I said, feeling defeated. I hope you are happy with your decision. Mom, if you want to fix things, you know what you have to do, he said before hanging up. I knew what I had to do. Apologize, crawl like a worm, begging for forgiveness for having defended my dignity. That call was like receiving confirmation of something I already knew but didn't want to accept. I had lost my son, not physically but emotionally. The woman he had married had achieved her goal. She had created a barrier between us so high it seemed impossible to cross. The days turned into weeks and the weeks into a month. I didn't hear anything from Julian. Tom told me to be patient, that he would surely get over his tantrum and come back begging for forgiveness. But I knew my son, and I knew that as long as he was under Rachel's influence, things wouldn't change. One afternoon, as I was watering my plants, the ones Stella had criticized for being wilted, the doorbell rang. My heart jumped, thinking it might be Julian, that he had finally come to seek reconciliation. But when I opened the door, it was Erica. Aunt Betty, I have to tell you something, she said with a serious expression. Yesterday, I ran into a friend who works in the same place as Rachel. She told me some things that will hurt, but I think you need to know. I sat on the couch, bracing myself for the worst. Erica took a deep breath before she started to speak. Rachel has been telling people at work that you kicked her out of your house for no reason. She says she showed up with a gift and that you insulted her because you're jealous that Julian got married. She's painting the story as if you're a crazy, obsessive mother-in-law. I felt as if I had been slapped. Not only had they humiliated me in my own home, but now they were destroying my reputation, telling a completely distorted version of the facts. But that's not all, Erica continued. My friend told me that Rachel brags about never spending a dime when she goes to other people's houses. She says she always finds a way to get invited and take home free food. She sees it as a game, a way to save money on groceries. The pain turned into rage. It hadn't been an accident. It hadn't been a misunderstanding. It had been a calculated plan, a cold and calculating strategy to take advantage of my generosity. And there's more, Erica said, taking my hand. Julian is also telling the story at his job. He says his mom went crazy out of the blue, that he's worried about your mental health. My mental health. My own son was suggesting I was crazy for having defended my dignity. The world had turned completely upside down. That night, after Erica left, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea and made the most difficult decision of my life. I wasn't going to beg, I wasn't going to grovel, I wasn't going to apologize for having defended my dignity. If my son had chosen the side of lies and manipulation, then I would choose the side of my self-worth. I got up, went to my bedroom, and took a suitcase out of the closet. Tom looked at me, confused, from the bed where he was reading. "What are you doing, Betty?" "I'm leaving," I said with a calmness that surprised even me. "I'm going to my sister Isabella's house in Dallas for a while. I need to get away from all this." Tom sat up, alarmed. "You're leaving? For how long?" "I don't know," I replied as I began to fold my clothes. "Maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2 months. I can't stay here waiting for my son to ask for forgiveness for something I didn't do wrong." My sister Isabella lives in a small house on the outskirts of Dallas. She has been a widow for 5 years and had always told me her door was open for me whenever I wanted to visit. I never thought I would need her as an emotional refuge. The next day, I took a bus. Tom wanted to come with me, but I asked him to stay. I needed to be alone, to process everything that had happened, to find my center again. The bus trip gave me 4 hours to think. I watched the landscape pass by the window and remembered the 32 years I had dedicated to raising Julian, the sleepless nights when he was a baby, the nights I stayed up when he had a fever, the financial sacrifices to give him the best education, the pride I felt when he graduated from college, the joy when he got his first job. What had all that been for? For him to treat me like a stranger now? For him to choose to defend two women who were clearly using him? Isabella greeted me with open arms and without asking questions. That first night, she let me cry all I needed to. I told her every detail of what had happened, every word, every gesture, every moment of humiliation. "Betty," she said when I finished telling her everything, "you didn't do anything wrong. If a son can't defend his mother when she's right, then something is very broken in that relationship." The first few days at Isabella's were difficult. I woke up with no desire to do anything, no appetite, no energy. I had fallen into a deep depression that I didn't know how to handle, but Isabella, who's a retired psychologist, helped me little by little. "The pain you're feeling isn't just about the barbecue," she explained one afternoon while we were drinking iced tea in her garden. "It's about years of an unequal relationship. You were always the one who gave, the one who sacrificed, and when you finally set a boundary, your son didn't know how to react." She was right. Reviewing the last 3 years, since Julian married Rachel, I realized that I had always been the one to adapt. When they couldn't come for lunch, I would change my plans. When Rachel wanted me to cook something specific, I would buy the ingredients. When they had financial problems, I would give them money without expecting them to pay it back. I had created a pattern of behavior where I was the unconditional provider, and they were the eternal beneficiaries. And when that pattern broke, when I said enough, they didn't know how to handle the situation. A week after I arrived in Dallas, Tom called me with news. "Betty, Julian came to the house yesterday," he said in a tense voice. My heart raced. What did he want? He was looking for some documents he had left in his old bedroom, but he also asked about you. "What did he say?" "He asked if I knew when you were coming back. I told him I didn't know, that it depended on you. He was quiet for a while, and then he asked if I thought he had done something wrong." "If he had done something wrong, please?" After a month of total silence, only now did it occur to him to wonder if maybe he had made a mistake. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him the truth, Betty. I told him that his mother had been humiliated in her own home, and that not only did he not defend her, but he also helped the people who were hurting her." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "How did he react?" "He started to cry," Tom told me, his voice cracking. "He cried like he did when he was a little boy. He told me that Rachel had convinced him that you were jealous, that you couldn't accept him having his own family, but that now, after all this time without talking to you, he was realizing that maybe things weren't as she had painted them." I felt a lump in my throat. My son was beginning to wake up, but the damage was already done. The wounds were too deep to be healed with a simple apology. Did he say anything else? He asked for Isabella's phone number. I told him he had to ask you for it first. I didn't give him the number. I wasn't ready to talk to him yet. I needed more time to heal, to find my inner strength, to decide what kind of relationship I wanted to have with my son in the future. Meanwhile, Isabella was helping me rediscover myself. We had started walking every morning in the nearby hills. The fresh air, the exercise, and the beauty of the landscape were bringing back my lost energy. She also signed me up for a reading group for older women where I met others who had gone through similar situations. It's incredible how children sometimes don't value their mother's sacrifices until it's too late. One of the women in the group, Mary Ann, a 70-year-old woman who hadn't spoken to her son in 2 years over a similar issue, told me, "What hurts me the most," I told her, "is that for 32 years, I thought I had raised a fair man who knew how to distinguish right from wrong. And now I discover that he can watch his mother be humiliated and do nothing to defend her. Children are loans from life," another woman, Caroline, said. "We raise them, we love them, we educate them, but in the end, they make their own decisions, and sometimes those decisions hurt us deeply." Those conversations began to open my eyes. I wasn't the only mother who had gone through this. I wasn't the only woman who had been hurt by a son she had loved unconditionally. One afternoon, as I was reading in Isabella's garden, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Betty?" It was Julian's voice, trembling and full of nerves. "How did you get this number?" I asked him coldly. "I asked your niece Erica for it. Mom, I need to talk to you." "You are talking to me?" "No, on the phone. I want to see you. I want to fly to Dallas to talk to you in person." Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, to tell him to come running, that we would fix everything with a hug like when he was a child. But the hurt part, the part that had been humiliated and betrayed, made me more cautious. "I don't know if I'm ready for that conversation, Julian. Mom, please. I've realized a lot of things. Rachel and I, things aren't good between us. She isn't the person I thought she was." "Oh, really?" Only now was he realizing that after treating me like a crazy person for a month? "What happened?" I asked, more out of curiosity than concern. "Last week we went to a barbecue at her parents' house, and I saw how she behaved there. She came with containers, she criticized the food, she complained about everything, exactly the same as with you. And when I realized what was happening, I understood that you were right. Right. When it was his turn to be on the side of the humiliated host, that's when he understood what I had felt. That doesn't change what happened, Julian. You abandoned me when I needed you most." "I know, Mom, and that's why I want to come to ask for your forgiveness in person, to explain everything that has happened, to tell you things I think you need to know." His voice sounded different. It was no longer the manipulated man who had spoken to me a month ago. He sounded like the son I had raised. "All right," I said, after thinking it over for a long time. "You can come this weekend." On Friday afternoon, Isabella and I were preparing dinner when we heard the doorbell. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would jump out of my chest. It had been almost 2 months since I had last seen my son, and I didn't know what to expect from this meeting. Isabella opened the door, and there was Julian. But he wasn't the same man who had left my house that terrible Sunday. He looked haggard. He had lost weight, had deep, dark circles under his eyes, and his clothes were wrinkled as if he had slept in them. He looked like a man who had been through an emotional hell. "Hi, Aunt Isabella," he said in a voice that was barely audible. "Is Mom here?" When he saw me appear in the hallway, his eyes filled with tears. He didn't run to hug me as the Julian I once knew would have. He just stood there like a child who knows he has done something very wrong and is waiting for his punishment. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "Hi, Julian." The silence that followed was awkward. Isabella, who always knows how to read situations, left us alone, saying she was going to buy a few things for dinner. We sat in Isabella's living room, facing each other, like two strangers meeting for the first time. My son, the same one who had grown up in my arms, who had been my partner in mischief, my pride and my joy, now seemed like a stranger. "Mom," he began with difficulty, "I've come to ask for your forgiveness, but before I do, I need to tell you what has happened, things that have opened my eyes about this whole time." I settled into the armchair and waited. After 2 months of silence, the least I could do was listen to him. "After what happened at your house, Rachel was unbearable for weeks. She wouldn't stop talking about how badly you had treated her, how unfair you had been. She convinced me that you were jealous, that you couldn't accept me having my own life." He paused and ran his hands over his face as if it was difficult to continue. "But 2 weeks ago, something happened that completely changed my perspective. Rachel's parents invited us to a barbecue at their house. It was her dad's birthday, and it was the first time we were going to one of their family gatherings." His voice became tenser, as if remembering what had happened was physically painful for him. "Rachel told me we should bring containers because there would surely be leftovers. I told her I thought that was strange, that it wasn't polite to go to someone else's house with containers, but she convinced me by saying it was normal, that all families do it." I felt a mix of rage and satisfaction. He was finally seeing his wife's true colors. When we arrived, Rachel greeted her parents and then sat down like a princess waiting to be served. Her mom had been cooking all day, had set a beautiful table, and had bought expensive wine, and Rachel started to criticize everything. Julian stood up and began to pace around the living room as if he couldn't stay still while he remembered. She told her mom that the meat was too salty, that the potatoes were undercooked, that the salad had too much oil. The same woman who had convinced me that you were being unfair for getting upset when she criticized your food was now tearing down her own mother with cruel comments. "And what did you do?" I asked him, although I already imagined the answer. At first I didn't say anything. I thought maybe it was just how they related to each other as a family. But when we finished eating, she took out the containers and started packing up food as if she were in a free supermarket. Julian stopped in front of the window and stared outside. Rachel's mom looked uncomfortable, but didn't say a word. Her dad was clearly annoyed, but he held back because she was his daughter. And that's when I understood everything, Mom. That's when I realized what we had done to you. He turned around and looked at me with eyes full of tears. You had spent your money, you had cooked with love, you had opened your home to welcome us, and we showed up like parasites, criticizing everything, taking advantage of your generosity, and when you finally exploded, I abandoned you. The tears began to roll down his cheeks, but he didn't do anything to stop them. Rachel's dad took me aside and said, "Julian, your wife does this at every house she's invited to. She always finds something to criticize, and she always takes food home. It's her way of saving money on groceries. And the worst part is that afterward, she tells made-up stories about how badly the host treated her." I felt as if I had been punched in the stomach. It hadn't been a coincidence. It hadn't been a misunderstanding. It had been a calculated and malicious pattern of behavior. "What else did he tell you?" I asked him, although I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. "He told me that Rachel had gone home, telling him that you had kicked her out for no reason, that you were a toxic and possessive mother-in-law. But he said he knew his daughter and he knew exactly what had happened. He told me that if I was smart, I should go ask for your forgiveness before it was too late." Julian sat down again, but this time he moved closer to me. That night, I had a terrible fight with Rachel. I told her what I had realized. I asked her why she had lied to me about what happened at your house, and that's when she showed her true colors. What did she say? She told me I was an idiot for believing her dad over her, that all mothers and mothers-in-law are the same. They want to control their sons forever. She said that if I loved her, I had to choose between her and you. The ultimatum, the final tactic of manipulators, forcing the victim to choose between the abuser and the people who genuinely love them. And what did you say to her? I told her that no one was going to force me to choose between my wife and my mother, that both of you had to learn to respect each other. But she went crazy. She started yelling at me, throwing things, insulting me. Julian took a deep breath before continuing. She said terrible things to me, Mom. She told me I was a mama's boy, that I was never going to grow up, that I was pathetic, and when I told her I was going to come see you to apologize, she threatened me with divorce. And I told her to do what she wanted, that I would rather be divorced than continue to live with someone who had made me betray my own mother. For the first time in 2 months, I felt something akin to pride for my son. He had finally found the courage to stand up for himself, to stand up for what was right. "We are separated," he said in a sad but firm voice. "I moved into a small apartment near my job. Rachel stayed in the house we bought together, but the lawyers will figure that out. How do you feel about all this?" I asked him. "Devastated," he admitted, but also relieved. For the 3 years we were married, I felt like I was losing my identity, that I was turning into someone I didn't recognize. Rachel had a very subtle way of manipulating me, of making me feel guilty every time I didn't do what she wanted. He moved even closer and took my hands. "Mom, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I know I hurt you deeply. I abandoned you when you needed me most. I defended people who were abusing you, and on top of that, I allowed them to say horrible things about you." His hands were trembling as they held mine. "But I need you to know that for the past 2 months, I have thought about you every single day. I woke up every morning feeling the weight of what I had done, and every day that passed without calling you was another day of cowardice on my part." "Why did it take you so long to realize?" I asked him. It was the question that had tormented me all this time, because it was easier to believe that you were wrong than to admit that I had married someone who wasn't worth it. It was easier to think that you were a difficult mother-in-law than to accept that I had betrayed the woman who loved me more than anyone in the world. Those words touched my heart, but there was still a lot of pain to heal. "Julian," I said, "what hurt me the most weren't Rachel's or Stella's words. What broke me was seeing you pack up that meat for them to take home, as if it was normal for your mother to spend her money to feed people who had come to humiliate her." "I know, Mom, and I have no excuse for that. All I can tell you is that I was completely blinded, completely manipulated, but that doesn't justify anything." We were silent for a long moment. There was so much accumulated pain between us, so many wounds that needed time to heal. "What do you expect from me now?" I finally asked. "I don't expect anything," he said with sincerity. "I just came to ask for your forgiveness and to tell you that I love you. If you give me the chance to rebuild our relationship, I will do everything in my power to earn back your trust. And if you can't forgive me, I will understand." I looked at my son for a long time without saying a word. I could see the genuine repentance in his eyes, but I could also feel all the wounds in my heart that were still bleeding. Forgiveness is not a switch that you turn on and off. It's a long and painful process, especially when the person who hurt you is the one you love most in the world. "Julian," I said at last, "I appreciate that you came all this way to apologize, and I'm glad that you finally opened your eyes about Rachel, but I can't act as if nothing happened." His expression filled with sadness, but he nodded with understanding. "I need time," I continued. "I need to process all of this. For 2 months, I have been rebuilding my self-worth, learning to value myself again after being humiliated in my own home by my own family." "I understand perfectly," he said in a soft voice. "I didn't come here to ask you to forget what happened. I just came to tell you the truth and to ask for your forgiveness." Isabella returned at that moment with grocery bags, and the tension broke a little. She insisted that Julian stay for dinner, and although he resisted at first, he finally accepted. During dinner, my son told me more details about everything that had happened after we had separated. He told me about the sleepless nights, about how he had started to question every single thing Rachel told him, about how he had begun to remember past situations with a new perspective. "Do you remember your birthday last year?" he asked me as we ate the dessert Isabella had prepared. "Which one?" I replied, although I knew exactly which one he meant. "The one where Rachel said she had a headache and couldn't come. Then we went out to dinner with her friends that same night, and she was perfectly fine." I remembered that birthday perfectly. It had been one of the many times Rachel had found an excuse not to come to my house. At the time, it had hurt, but I had justified it by thinking that maybe she really felt uncomfortable. "Now I realize she never wanted to be a part of our family," Julian continued. "She always looked for excuses not to come, and when she did come, it was to take advantage of something." Isabella, who had been listening in silence, finally spoke. "Julian, what I think is most important about all of this is not so much that you realized what Rachel was like, but that you found the courage to admit you were wrong and came to ask your mother for forgiveness. My sister was right. It would have been easy to put all the blame on Rachel and paint himself as a victim of manipulation. But Julian was taking responsibility, acknowledging that he had made wrong decisions. That night, after Julian left for the hotel where he was staying, Isabella and I sat in her garden to talk. "What are you going to do?" she asked me as we drank some tea. "I don't know," I replied honestly. Part of me wants to hug him and forgive everything immediately, but another part of me feels that I need more time. "It's normal to feel that way," Isabella said. "A mother's love never goes away, but trust has to be rebuilt, and that takes time." The next day, Julian came early in the morning. He had brought pastries from a bakery downtown and some good coffee. The 3 of us had breakfast together, and for a moment it felt almost like old times, back when he was young and would come to visit on weekends. But I knew we couldn't go back to the past. Too many things had changed. I had changed. "Mom," he said when Isabella went to run some errands and left us alone again, "I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Tell me, do you think you'll ever be able to completely forgive me? Do you think our relationship can go back to how it was before?" The question hit me right in the heart because it was the same one I had been asking myself since I arrived. "Julian," I said, after thinking it over for a long time, "I'm going to be honest with you as you asked. I love you with all my heart, and I always will. You are my son. You are a part of me, and nothing can change that." I saw him relax a little, but I wasn't finished. "But I don't know if our relationship can go back to being exactly what it was before, because before, I was a mother who gave everything without asking for anything in return, who justified her son's every behavior, who put her own needs after everyone else's." I paused to gather my thoughts. Over the past 2 months, I've learned to value myself, to respect myself, to set boundaries. I am no longer the same woman I was before that barbecue. And this new version of me needs a more balanced relationship, one where the respect is mutual. Julian listened with his full attention, as if every word was essential to him. "Does that mean you don't want me back in your life?" he asked me in a trembling voice. "No, that means that if you come back into my life, it has to be in a different way. I need to feel that you respect me as a person, not just that you love me as a mother. I need to know that if in the future someone disrespects me, you will be on my side if I am in the right." "I can promise you that," he said with firmness. "I will never again allow anyone to treat you poorly in front of me. I will never again choose the easy path when I have to stand up for what's right." "Promises are easy to make when you're sorry," I told him. "What will convince me are actions, time, the consistency of your behavior." Julian nodded, understanding that this was going to be a long process. "What do you need from me?" he asked me. "I need you to understand that trust is built little by little. I need you to respect my timing, my decisions, my boundaries. And I need you to show me, with actions, not just words, what you've learned from this." "Are we starting over from scratch?" he asked. "No, not from scratch," I clarified. "We have 32 years of history together, and most of those years were beautiful. But we do need to start a new stage, one where we are both more mature, more aware, and more respectful of each other." That afternoon, before Julian went back to Los Angeles, we went for a walk in the hills. It was something we had done a lot when he was a teenager, and it felt natural to do it again now. "Mom," he said as we walked up a trail, "there's something else I need to tell you." "What is it?" "Rachel is pregnant." I stopped dead in my tracks. Of all the things I could have expected to hear, that was the one I least imagined. "Pregnant?" I repeated, feeling as if cold water had been thrown on me. 2 months along, he confirmed. I found out just before we separated. In fact, it was part of the reason it took me so long to make the decision to leave her. My mind began to process the implications of this news. I was going to be a grandmother, but the mother of my grandchild was a woman who hated me, who had lied about me, who had humiliated me in my own home. "What are you going to do?" I asked him. "I'm going to be a father," he said, with a mixture of sadness and determination. "No matter what happened between Rachel and me, that baby is my child, and I'm going to be present in his or her life." "And what does that mean for us?" I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. "It means things are going to be complicated," he admitted. "But I'm not going to let Rachel use my child as a weapon against you. That baby is going to know his or her grandmother. They're going to grow up knowing they have a family that loves them." It was a complex situation that added another layer of difficulty to our already complicated relationship, but it also gave me hope. Julian was talking about defending my place in my grandchild's life, about not allowing them to keep me away from my own family. "I need time to process this too," I told him. "I understand," he replied. "I just wanted you to know so you wouldn't find out from someone else." When we got back to Isabella's house, Julian got ready to leave. We hugged for the first time in 2 months, and although it wasn't the warm, unrestrained hug of before, it was a start. "I'll call you next week," he promised. If you want me to. Yes, I replied. I want you to. I watched him walk away down the street and felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for all that we had lost, hope for what we could rebuild, and something akin to peace for having kept my dignity intact. 6 months after that conversation in Dallas, I am sitting in my kitchen writing this while I wait for my son to arrive with my newborn granddaughter. Yes, granddaughter. Rachel gave birth to a beautiful baby girl whom they named Sophia, and today is the first time I am going to meet her. The months that followed Julian's visit to Isabella's house were a slow but steady process of rebuilding. He kept his word. He called me every week, always respecting my boundaries, never pressuring me for anything. He told me how things were going with the pregnancy, how he was handling the separation, and how he was preparing to be a single father. Because yes, Julian and Rachel got divorced. She tried to use it as revenge against me, forbidding him from visiting me if he wanted to be present for the pregnancy. But my son had learned his lesson. He told her clearly that I was his mother and that I was going to be a part of his daughter's life, whether she liked it or not. I returned to Los Angeles 3 months after I had left. Isabella had helped me a lot to heal, to find my inner strength, to understand that self-love is not selfishness, it's emotional survival. When I returned to my house, I was no longer the same woman who had left. I was stronger, more self-assured, less willing to accept disrespect from anyone. Tom greeted me with open arms and with some interesting news. During my absence, he had been in contact with Erica and Louisa, who had told him things that surprised me a lot. It turns out that after the barbecue drama, Rachel had been telling her distorted version of events all over the neighborhood. But Erica and Louisa had talked to other people who knew Rachel and had discovered that I was not her first victim. Mrs. Johnson, who lives 3 blocks away, told me that Rachel did the same thing at her grandson's baptism, Tom told me on that first night back. She showed up with containers, criticized everything, and then left telling people she had been treated poorly. Really? And not only that, Tom continued, Louisa's sister also had problems with her. She invited her to her birthday, and Rachel behaved in the exact same way. It seems that's just how she operates. Knowing that it hadn't been personal, that I hadn't done anything specifically wrong to deserve that treatment, helped me a lot to process everything that had happened. Rachel was simply that way, a person who took advantage of others' generosity and then blamed them when she was confronted. When Julian found out I was back, he asked permission to visit me. It was strange to have him in the house again after all that had happened. He sat in the same chair where he used to sit as a boy, but everything felt different. "How are you, Mom?" he asked, and I could see that he genuinely wanted to know the answer. "I'm doing well," I replied, and it was the truth. I am different, but I am well. During that visit, we established new rules for our relationship. I was no longer going to be the mother who gave everything without receiving anything in return. I was no longer going to justify disrespectful behavior. I was no longer going to put others' needs above my own dignity. "I understand," he said, when I explained my new boundaries, "and I want you to know that I respect them completely." The following visits were gradually more comfortable. Julian brought flowers, helped with the cooking, and asked what he could do to help. Small gestures that showed he had understood that respect is demonstrated with actions, not just words. When Rachel gave birth, things got complicated again. She tried to prevent Julian from telling me about the birth, but he was no longer the easily manipulated man of before. He called me from the hospital to tell me he had a beautiful and healthy granddaughter. "Rachel doesn't want you to come to the hospital," he said with sadness. "But as soon as I can take Sophia to my apartment, I will introduce her to you." It didn't hurt not being able to go to the hospital. I had already learned not to take Rachel's spite personally. The important thing was that my son was keeping his promise not to let me be kept away from my granddaughter. During the first few weeks after the birth, Julian had to fight hard to be able to take Sophia to his apartment. Rachel tried to control him by using the baby, but he stood firm. He even threatened to go to court if necessary. "I'm not going to let her use my daughter as a weapon," he told me over the phone one night, sounding exhausted. Sophia has a right to know her grandmother, and you have a right to know your granddaughter. And here we are. Julian is going to arrive any minute with 3-week-old Sophia. I have prepared everything carefully. The bassinet he used when he was a baby clothes I bought with so much excitement, and a grandmother's heart full of love that is ready to meet this new addition to the family. I hear the car in the driveway. It's him. When I open the door, I see my son with a tiny baby in his arms. Sophia is beautiful. She has Julian's eyes and something in her face that reminds me of him when he was a baby. "Mom," he says with a huge smile, "I'd like you to meet your granddaughter, Sophia." When I hold her in my arms for the first time, I feel my heart fill with a pure joy I haven't felt in a long time. This innocent baby has nothing to do with the conflicts of adults. She only deserves love, care, and a family that will protect her. "Hello, my love," I whisper as I watch her sleep. "I'm your Grandma Betty." Julian looks at me with tears in his eyes. "Mom, I want you to know something. No matter what happens with Rachel, no matter what difficulties may come, Sophia will always know who her grandmother is. She will always grow up knowing your love." "Thank you," I say, unable to hold back my own tears. We spent the afternoon together, the three of us. Julian tells me about his plans as a single father, about how he is organizing his life to give Sophia everything she needs. He also tells me that Rachel has finally accepted that I am going to be a part of the baby's life, even if she doesn't like it. "You know what the most ironic thing about all this is?" he says to me while I feed Sophia her bottle. "What?" "Rachel always told me that you were controlling, that you wanted to manage my life. But in the end, the one who was trying to control every aspect of my existence was her. You just wanted to love me and have me feel free to make my own decisions." It's true. For 32 years, my only goal had been to raise him to be a good, independent man, capable of distinguishing between right and wrong. Manipulation had never been my style. When it's time for them to leave, it's hard for me to say goodbye to Sophia, but I know this is only the beginning. I know I will watch her grow up. I will be a part of her life. I will be able to love her as she deserves to be loved. "We'll come again next week," Julian promises me as he puts the baby in her car seat. "I'll be waiting," I say, and for the first time in a long time, I feel that the future is full of beautiful possibilities. That night, as Tom and I have dinner alone, I reflect on everything that has happened. I lost a son for a few months, but regained a man. I lost a toxic relationship with a manipulative daughter-in-law, but gained a precious granddaughter. I lost my infinite patience and my tendency to justify everything, but I gained self-respect and healthy boundaries. "Do you regret saying those 3 words that Sunday?" Tom asks me. "No," I reply without hesitation. They were the most liberating 3 words I have ever said in my life, because sometimes to start a new life, to regain lost dignity, to teach people how to treat you, all you need to do is say, "Get the hell out," and then back it up with actions. Today, I am a 65-year-old woman who knows her worth, who doesn't accept disrespect from anyone, who loves deeply, but also loves herself. I am Sophia's grandmother, Tom's wife, Julian's mother, but before all that, I am Betty, and Betty deserves respect. And now, every time I host a barbecue, I only do it for people who show up with their hands full and their hearts full of gratitude, because that's the only way to live. Surrounded by people who know how to appreciate generosity, not take advantage of it. Life went on, but now I live it on my own terms. 2 years after that Sunday that changed my life forever, I'm here in my kitchen preparing another barbecue. But this time, everything is different. The table is set for 6 people. Tom and me, Julian with Sophia, who is now 2.5 years old, and Isabella, who came from Dallas to spend a few days with us. Sophia is running around the yard, chasing butterflies with that infinite energy only small children have. Every time she sees me, she yells, "Grandma Betty!" and runs to hug me with those chubby little arms that melt my heart. She is an intelligent, sweet, and, thankfully, has none of her mother's temperament. Julian has become an exemplary father. He worked hard to get joint custody of Sophia, and now he has her for half of the week. The days she is with me are pure joy. We have established a beautiful routine. She comes on Wednesdays after preschool and stays until Friday morning. "Mom," Julian says to me as he tidies up Sophia's toys that are scattered throughout the living room, "did I tell you Rachel moved to Las Vegas?" "Really?" I ask him as I cut tomatoes for the salad. "She left with a guy she met at work. At first I thought it was going to be a problem for Sophia's visits, but it turns out it works out better for her. She doesn't have to see me as often." It's funny how things just work themselves out. Rachel finally found someone else to manipulate, and we regained the family peace we had lost. Julian has grown so much as a person during these 2 years. He is no longer the insecure man who let himself be manipulated. Now he makes his own decisions, stands up for what he believes is right, and most importantly, he is a present and loving father. "Do you know what Sophia told me yesterday?" he asks me as he helps me set the plates on the table. "What did she tell you?" "She asked me why Grandma Rachel never comes to visit, but Grandma Betty is always here. I explained to her that every family is different, but the important thing is that she is surrounded by people who love her." I am moved to tears hearing this. Sophia is already learning, without anyone having to explain it directly, who the people are who truly love her and who are absent by their own choice. Isabella comes out to the patio with a tray of hot dogs she made this morning. My sister has been my greatest support throughout this whole process. Every time I have doubts, every time I feel that maybe I was too harsh, she reminds me that defending your own dignity is never wrong. "Do you remember what you told me 2 years ago?" I ask her as we put the hot dogs on the table. "What's that?" "That children are loans from life, that in the end, they make their own decisions." "And I was right," she says with a smile. "Julian made the right decision, even if it took him a while." Tom comes from the supermarket with wine and ice. At his age, he is still the most patient and wise man I know. Throughout this whole family crisis, he was my rock, my unconditional support. "How's the grill?" I ask him. "Perfect. We can start putting the meat on in an hour." This time, I only bought 11 pounds of meat. I no longer need to impress anyone or show off my generosity in an exaggerated way. I cook with love for the people who truly appreciate that love, not for those who see it as a free obligation. As we prepare everything, I think about how much things have changed. Erica and Louisa still come to the house regularly, and every time they bring something to share. The difference is that now I also go to their houses, bringing desserts or salads. Our family relationships became more balanced, healthier. "Grandma Betty," Sophia yells to me from the yard. "Come see the flower I found." I run out to see her discovery. It's a small daisy that grew between the stones on the path. To her, it is the most beautiful treasure in the world. "How pretty," I say, picking her up. "Shall we put it in a small vase with water?" "Yes, so it doesn't die." We go inside together to find a small vase. As I pour water into it, Sophia looks at me with those huge eyes, full of curiosity. "Grandma, why does Daddy say you are the bravest woman he knows?" The question catches me by surprise. "Your daddy says that?" "Yes. He asked Uncle Tom why you are brave, and Uncle Tom said it's because you always tell the truth, even when it's hard." I am moved to tears. It's beautiful to know that my experience, no matter how painful it was, is turning into a life lesson for my granddaughter. "Sometimes, my love," I explain to her as we put the daisy in its little vase, "people don't treat us well, and when that happens, we have to be brave and stand up for ourselves. Like when Martin takes my toys at school." "Exactly like that. You don't have to let anyone take your toys without permission." It's incredible how children understand complex concepts through simple situations. Sophia is learning from an early age, something that took me 65 years to fully understand, that respect is earned and maintained by setting clear boundaries. The afternoon passes perfectly. We eat on the patio, laughing, telling stories, and enjoying each other's company. Julian helps me serve without being asked. Isabella entertains Sophia with stories. Tom handles the grill like the master he is. When we finish eating, Sophia falls asleep in my arms. I carry her inside and lay her on the couch, covering her with a soft blanket. Seeing her sleep so peacefully, so securely, fills me with a deep peace. "Mom," Julian says to me when I return to the patio, "I want to thank you again for everything." "For what?" "For teaching me that loving someone doesn't mean accepting anything, for showing me that you can forgive without forgetting, for standing firm until I understood what really matters." His words touch my soul. For a long time I wondered if I had done the right thing by standing firm, by not giving in immediately when he came to apologize. But now I see that my firmness was necessary for our relationship to be rebuilt on a solid foundation. "Julian," I say, taking his hand, "the only thing I ever wanted was to raise you to be a good man. Sometimes the paths get twisted, but the important thing is to know how to get back on the right one. And I did, thanks to you." While Isabella and Tom talk about the Dallas Hills, Julian and I stay in silence, enjoying this moment of family peace. There is no longer any tension between us, no more forbidden topics, no more unhealed wounds. When it's time to clear the table, everyone helps without being asked. Sophia wakes up and wants to help too, taking the used napkins to the trash can with the seriousness of someone completing an important mission. "You know what the most beautiful thing about all this is?" I say to Tom as we wash the dishes. "What's that?" "That Sophia is growing up in a family where people respect each other. She will never know toxic dynamics. She will never normalize a lack of respect." "It's true," he says, giving me a kiss on the cheek. "You did well to set boundaries for everything. Look at what you've achieved." When everyone leaves and the house falls silent again, I sit in my favorite armchair with a cup of tea. I think about that woman who 2 years ago spent $250 on a barbecue only to be humiliated in her own home. That woman no longer exists. In her place is this new version of me, a grandmother who enjoys her granddaughter without feeling obligated to prove anything, a mother who has an adult and balanced relationship with her son, a woman who knows her worth and accepts nothing less than what she deserves. Sometimes I hear indirect news about Rachel. According to Julian, her life in Las Vegas isn't as rosy as she pretends on social media, but it no longer makes me feel angry or satisfied. She is simply someone who passed through my life, taught me a valuable lesson, and moved on. The most important lesson I learned from all of this is that it's never too late to change, to grow, to stand up for yourself. At 65 years old, I discovered that I had an inner strength I didn't know I possessed. And the most beautiful thing is that I don't use that strength to attack or seek revenge, but to love better, to demand respect, to build healthier relationships. Tomorrow, Sophia will come to the house again. We're going to bake cookies together. I'm going to read her stories, and I'm going to teach her by example that being a good person doesn't mean being weak. Because at the end of the day, everything I went through was worth it for this moment. Sitting in my home, at peace with myself, knowing that my family respects me and loves me genuinely. And if someday someone asks me what the most important moment of my life was, I will tell them it was that Sunday when I said 3 words that gave me back my dignity. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.